Hey, change makers and visionaries. This is ReImagining Community, where we dive deep into the stories of leaders who are reshaping the world, one community at a time. I'm your host, Garland Fuller, and every episode is a radical act of connection. We're not just talking about change, we're breaking down how real people are creating it right here, right now. This podcast is more than conversations. It's a bridge where we are sharing stories that offer insight and inspiration. Whether you're an entrepreneur, consultant, volunteer, artist, or an organizational leader, this is your space to listen and learn. This is your call to create impact in the communities you hold dear and that hold you up. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Welcome to this episode of ReImagining Community. Today, I have the wonderful Farzana Nayani. She is such a joy to be around. I will tell you the story of how we met. Shout out to Allison Whites because you two were co-working at the same place, and she told me, "Oh, you have to meet Farzana." And at the time, I was thinking about consulting. And at the time, I had no idea that our paths would cross the way they have and we would start working together. And she would essentially show me how the consulting works, give me an opportunity to be in front of her clients, allow me to facilitate discussions, sessions. And I think at the time thought, I can do this. And then, wow, she's amazing. I had no idea. This was a whole other life out here that was possible for me. I don't think you knew this, Farzana, but I felt like at that point in time, I could see light at the end of a tunnel.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. And now I had no idea what was going on in the background as we were meeting and working together.
Yes. And so I am happy to have you on today because you have a wonderful consulting practice. She has been doing diversity, equity, inclusion work, but she also, I think, infuses so much of her heart-centered, empathetic, a way of doing this where it doesn't feel like we are dealing with the human and not just dealing with the work, because you can't do the work without dealing with the human. And so she does an amazing job of that. I think getting to work with you directly is probably why I gravitated towards you and enjoy working with you so much, because we do so much work on how people are on the inside. And you have to deal with that in order to do this work. She's got books, y'all. She's a keynote speaker. She's fantastic facilitator. I could go on and on.
Thanks. I brought them to show folk.
We put them in the LinkedIn, put all your stuff in there. She has a LinkedIn learning course, all the things. I'm just so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much for that wonderful and generous introduction, Garland. It's been such a pleasure to work with you and get to know you. And yes, human-centered consulting work and facilitation is really what I am involved with. And I'm so glad to have met you and to partner with you on so many projects.
Wonderful. So this whole podcast is about community and how we can reimagine new ways of thinking about community. I think because of so much of the work you do with leaders and organizations and people, we can't talk about what's going on in the world without talking about ourselves and the work that needs to happen inside of ourselves. And so when I reached out to you to do this today, it was, how can we reimagine a new way of moving forward as a community, as a world, where we're thinking about things differently? So before we start that, let's go back to talk about Farzana and what made her get into this work and how you started doing this work and your amazing, I'd say, outlook on how you do this.
Definitely would love to share. I actually have a passion for education and was involved with teaching for a time. And in my classes for adult, when I would teach over the summer, I would notice that there was cross-cultural differences amongst the international students that I was working with. And I found that I was so intrigued by that I had this passion to learn more. And so I went to grad school to study cross-cultural and intercultural communication. And I was so astounded by this entire field about how we can understand differences. So my path to that, even before that, came from my home. So in my upbringing, my mother's from the Philippines, my father's from Pakistan with roots in India. So I grew up in a multi-ethnic and multi-faith household. And I had always been met with like different cultural differences, different ways of communicating, different norms, and even different humor. And what I found was that there's just such a love and joy in bringing that all together. So I think I've embodied that from such a young age. And then I bring that into my work. And I just have a lot of love for people different than me and for helping bridge differences. So as I evolved in the cross-cultural work, there was a lot of work around belonging in organizations and, as we know, workplace engagement, employee engagement. And so that pivoted me into working with companies, organizations, higher education institutions, and nonprofits and school districts. I have a variety of clients, and I feel so blessed to be able to work with people around implementing ways, strategies to work better together and even change in how we can get along.
Yeah. So I know that you have a lot of thoughts right now around we have a world that feels very fractured. We have a world where it feels like sometimes we're not translating properly our language, our actions, our intentions. Can we talk a little bit more about how to handle the human side of things? I know you've got a ideology that you're looking at right now that I'd love to hear more about.
Absolutely. So, in my work with different organizations as a consultant and an advisor, I found a key ingredient to real change and impact in an organization, and that is a person's own personal development. And without that, we actually can't have any progress. As much as we want to implement policies or strategies or frameworks or any type of business objective, it really doesn't make a difference unless people believe in it. And it has to start with yourself. It has to start with the leader. So this model that I'm working on fleshing out and sharing more about and doing keynotes on is the concept of really understanding ourselves. And so it's a 3-part model. And in it, I talk about how the first step is to know yourself. You have to know yourself and really understand who you are, the different layers of what you bring, and even any areas of growth. It could be trauma, it could be your historical experiences, it could be your identity, it could be ability or disability, it could be anything to do with your identity, the layers of identity you have. And not to hide it, really, because in all my work around identity, there's just so much we cover and are ashamed of or feel like we need to assimilate. So that's the first part of the model. The second part really is about healing yourself. So know yourself and heal yourself. And in that, we have different areas where perhaps we hide, or maybe we have a wound or we're shamed. And that is a big barrier to vulnerability. It's a big barrier to really guiding others and being present in any experience or being there for other people. And so what's needed is that really intentional reflection and commitment to making yourself like a better version of yourself. But in order to do that, we have to acknowledge where we have pain or we have growth, areas of growth that we need. And where that takes us to is the last part of the model. So know yourself and heal yourself. Then the last part is lead others. And so after we understand who we are and we're able to grapple with and heal the parts that need tending to, then that's really where we can help influence others and guide and lead from a place of strength. It's not a place of weakness or a place of power and control. It's a place of modeling, a place of being a role model to others, a mentor, an inspiration. And what I found is that if you look at anyone who's been through maybe a difficult experience, or maybe who has beaten cancer or has had a near-death experience, or who has lost a family member or something like that's been really difficult, when they come out the other end, they have a different perspective. And I think we don't have to have that level of tragedy in order to come out with that renewed sense of commitment to leading others and being there. But we can do it on a daily basis through reflection, through commitment and growth, and through acknowledging where we need support or time. So that's the model, and it's been really well received by a lot of organizations. I actually just recorded it as a TED-style talk recently, and I'm excited to share that soon.
Wonderful. I know that this self-work, the knowing yourself part, I think is sometimes the hardest part for people to just start on themselves. I know myself when and this is a lifelong journey too. I think sometimes we think everything is you start, you're going to know yourself, and then we want to wrap everything up or that. And I think it's like a becoming, it's like an unfolding, it's a continuous journey. There's layers as you continue to learn more about yourself and you put yourself in scenarios and situations that require you to grow and require you to stretch. You continue to learn more as you go. And so I know a lot of leaders are sometimes, especially when they reach a certain level in an organization, they have a title, it's the things that you work to get to. You think you've made it, and I feel like that's only the beginning. Now you really have to show up even more and be more aware of yourself and have an emotional intelligence that is really second to none, because people are watching you, people depend on you, people are looking at how you react to situations, how you deal with conflict. And I myself, I know when I work with leaders and just when I myself was in corporate organizations, I looked for the leaders who had a quiet confidence, an integrity, a sense of no matter what's going on, they're present and they're very much willing to say the hard thing and do the hard thing. And I feel like sometimes that's missing in a lot of our leaders today. And then when you see leadership that is a command and control style, and I know you and I have talked about this command and control style of leadership that seems like it may have brought us here, or it has worked for so long, but it's not necessarily going to take us to the next level, nor is it working for everyone. Return to office is a big thing right now. Can we talk a little bit about return to office, command control style leadership, why this way is not working?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we look at the environmental factors that are around us, we went through the pandemic, and in some senses, we're still going through it and trying to recover from it. And we have economic, political, and environmental, factors, variables that are around us that we're managing. And what that has left us with is uncertainty. And so what employees need, or anybody needs right now, is empathetic leadership. And any type of leadership that is really severe, or it doesn't take into account people's needs, it's going to miss the mark. And so as we return to office from being at home, where we had more autonomy and connection with our families and our neighborhoods and our gardens, and cooking from home, or self-care, health and fitness, whatever it is that we had at home, and now we've got to bring ourselves back to work, we're leaving parts of ourselves at home. And so leaders now have to be empathetic to that transition and have that ability to offer a sense of understanding and a sense of encouragement. And that really requires putting yourself in someone's shoes. It also requires the need for authenticity. So what people are looking for is authentic leadership, for people who are willing to be vulnerable, for people who are willing to be transparent, for people who are willing to put people first over a company's bottom line. And when I do consulting work with various groups, I remember there was a poll where they had asked people in the audience, what's important to you in terms of commerce or culture or community, that sort of thing. And really at the bottom of the list was like the business bottom line. What was first was community and creating a culture where people felt like they belonged. And why that's important is because it's not really the top of the list. Obviously, we are at workplaces to be productive and perform our duty. But people are there for other reasons. They're there to connect. They're there to be human. They're there to be whole. They're there to, in the time that they spend in commitment to an organization, like they want to have a good experience. And leaders that understand that and can create an environment where people feel connected are going to be successful. And so I want to share actually something that just happened this morning to a close friend of mine, and I wanted to bring it up in this podcast, if I may, as an example.
Sure.
A good friend of mine informed me that she just experienced a miscarriage, and it's so sad, it's so devastating, and it's so physically taxing on the body. There's such a range of emotions. It's so painful in so many ways, and it's actually quite common, and it's something people don't talk about. And in my communication with her, I had to remind her to take a day off. I had to remind her to take a break. I had to remind her that work can wait. And it's really up to her how much she wants to share with people around her. But what's hard for us is when we go through these human experiences and we can't like have accommodations at work that really honor the pain or the grief or the transition, whatever we're going through. And I really wish that for organizations. I really wish that when a person's going through something, even if it's secondhand through watching the news and seeing something impact you because you're of the culture that's being talked about as the headline, like I really wish that we can have leaders that could understand how that affects us. And there was a meme going around a few years ago where they had this teacher and there's like a shopping bag outside her door. And she said, everybody who comes in my classroom, they can just park everything at the door. They don't need to bring anything with them inside. And although the intention was good around, you don't have to bring the outside in, it really rubbed people the wrong way because it meant that you're leaving yourself at the door. And we don't want that. We want to have a place where we can be whole and honored. And I understand it is certain environments you can't do that. That's true. And at the same time, for my friend who just went through that, I would hope that she has support at her workplace.
Yeah. I think about we give bereavement, which is, I think, for a loved one. And I think it's like usually 3 days, which still isn't enough when you think about a close family member passing away. And so when you have a miscarriage, you need honestly leave. You need leave just to take a moment to even all the excitement and anticipation of thinking you're going to have a child and then having that taken from you and then feeling all the feelings. And then you have a manager that you either probably did not even tell that you were carrying a child. So now it's a lot. It's a lot. And when I think about this, I think about how many people are bringing things to work that you don't know about. Because I think I work in HR, I was always thinking about people, like that's the center of what I do. And I made a point to sit in different places. We had open office. I used to just purposefully go to different floors and sit in different places so that I could be in different departments to feel how the different departments were and just see how the managers interacted with people and get to know the people in those particular departments. And I don't think that we do that enough anymore. We don't talk to each other outside of the main group that we're working in. Maybe we go to some type of office event that's a lunch or whatever, but people still sit with the people they know. It's just, I feel like we are at a point where if we don't infuse the human back into these workplaces, it's going to become transactional. It's becoming transactional.
Yes, and part of it is we don't know how to have those conversations. We don't know how to get personal without offending someone. And some of the workshops I'm doing most recently is how to have crucial conversations at work, how to have like a deeper dialogue in a respectful way, in a way that does surface different views or shows that you care, or it might feel like you're crossing a line because you're sharing something personal or you're asking about somebody, but there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it to show that you're connected to the person, you're engaged, you have empathy, and you're more than just clocking in. You're here for the relationship. And I think we may have lost that, maybe through COVID or maybe through just the polarized times we're in, that people are on different sides of many issues, that it can be hard. It's truly difficult sometimes to talk about things. However, again, if we do take the people-centered approach, people-first approach, then it can lead the way. And again, if you know yourself to be strong in what you stand for and have that confidence and ability, and then heal the parts that might be triggering or might be exposing you to being vulnerable or might be a hot button for you, if you've resolved that, that's how you can lead others from that true place of empathy and guidance.
Yeah, I do think that we do need to go back to the basics. I remember walking into the workplace and even saying good morning to somebody. Culturally, for me, you say good morning. Like in Belize, where I grew up, when you enter a room, you say good morning to people, or you say good afternoon or good evening, and just greeting people is, and if you don't greet people, look at you like, oh my God, you didn't say something to me. And so I remember first time in a corporate workspace and I said good morning and someone didn't say good morning back to me. And I know they didn't, I know they heard me, they didn't have on anything. And so I was thinking, oh, we don't say good morning here. But I was also thinking, oh, I'm going to keep saying good morning until you say good morning back. And so you have to, I feel like that's where we're at. Just like saying good morning.
Yeah. And I think people have a hard time with, we need to redefine things like personal space or making eye contact. And some of that's cultural. Some of it is just we've lost the ability to have a human interaction again because we're on screens or we're like watching videos on social media and whatnot. So some of it is we just need to practice that again. So when you say back to basics, I kind of smile because we've lost some of that and it can be uncomfortable. And it's so interesting that we're talking about this at this time, but it's a needed conversation.
Yeah. It's bringing the Mr. Rogers and the Sesame Street 101. I feel like it sounds crazy to people, but it's really what it is because we're all just older children.
And we're still growing. We're still learning and maturing, and we make mistakes.
We totally make mistakes. And it's okay to make a mistake and find out what you needed to know that made that not work. And then apologize if you need to apologize and then move on to be okay. But I think it is become difficult. I think I saw it in 2020 when everything happened and people were feeling a certain type of way. And then you get in a meeting and there's multiple responses to an event that occurred. So I have an example. When there was all these protests happening as a result of the murder of George Floyd, one of the local malls here, a very well-known mall, was vandalized. I work in commercial real estate. And so we get on this call and essentially some conversation comes up around the person who owns this mall and them being upset and them calling LAPD and being more concerned for the property and the delays of the property, which valid concern, and then how that was perceived with the people who did the vandalizing and the words that were used and how they were called. And I was on this call. I was off camera because I was just beside myself because I was thinking, there's insurance. This will all be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be back to normal, business as usual operating. And
Mm-hmm.
at least reality is going to keep going.
Yeah, there's so many layers to what you shared and puts people last in that example. And especially when it's a heightened moment and it's about violence and about like community care, like it's a missed opportunity. And look, I get that you want to protect the property. And at the same time, why was that moment in time there? It's for us to learn and to understand and be mindful, right? And so when we look at the corporations that are taking a stand or not taking a stand or making different actions and statements, it indicates to the consumer and to the employees what they believe in. And so another thing for us to all remember is that we are in a very much a values-based society. The generations that are up and coming look at that in terms of where they work, in terms of where they shop. And that's so important, right? And so we're completely missing the mark in terms of who we are serving and how we're serving the folks we serve and different stakeholders. But also, we could lose people if we're not careful. And in fact, I teach at UCLA, and we were just talking about this last night at class, where there's certain cultures and preferences toward the task. So some cultures or some people or some environment is just direct, right to the task. And then other cultures or environments or organizations have a culture of let's build a relationship. And so some of it comes back to that cross-cultural understanding, but it also comes down to power. Who's calling the shots and what kind of leadership they're dictating. So again, do we want to be mindful? Do we want to support people around us? Do we want to have that understanding? Or do we want to so on task that we miss the people's experience? And I've worked with clients. We had a client out in Illinois, and there was so much of a spectrum of people who disagreed about this. And it's the point where they're arguing, like yelling across the auditorium as I'm presenting a workshop, just because they felt so passionate about being right. And if we're so busy trying to be right all the time, it means we're not listening. And so another part of my model that I need to expand on is how to listen, right? How to listen with intention, how to think about what we're hearing and respond to it, not react, but respond. And then in the future, be proactive about it. But that's something, again, back to basics, right? Garland, I think we're onto something like listen. I feel like that's the kindergarten skill, right? Pause and listen. And we can make fun of it, but again, I think we've lost that in society. Like, how do we truly listen to one another?
Yeah, I think we need to bring the talking stick back or the like some kind of totem, something you're keeping in your hand while you speak, and then you have to pass it to the next person and have them hold it. And so it forces people to actually have to be present, because if you don't have it, then it's not your turn. And then when you have to pass it, then now it's okay. And so I know those rituals sound very like basic, but I have found that is sometimes what you have to do. I also teach, I started putting out fidgets. I started putting out fidgets in my class. I started it last semester because I have a 6 o'clock class, and I know you know about this. By the time they get to you at the end of the day, they are just wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to even be present at the class, they feel like they've made it because they just showed up, which they have. However, I started reconfiguring the classroom. I started bringing in fidgets. I started having activities where they actually had to physically move around the classroom. And it's helped so much because now they know me, and they know that they can't just hide in the back or wherever they're hiding, hide behind their laptops. But two, they get to know the other people in the class. College isn't what it used to be either. And so I feel like we need to bring back, at least for myself, it's creating cultures, practices, routines, rituals, things that force us to have to be here and like managing the emotions by not just, like you said, reacting, but pausing and responding. And if you have something in your hand, that means your turn. If you don't have anything in your hand, it's not your turn.
And listen when it's not your turn. Really be present. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me think of how technology is such a solve for so many problems, and it's such a shortcut, and it's such a gift. And at the same time, it skips all these steps, right? It doesn't teach you how to listen. It doesn't teach you how to be present. It doesn't teach you how to have pleasantry or build a relationship with somebody. You've got to go out there and practice that. And whoever's listening to that, when you come across a colleague or you're leading a team or even in yourself, see if you can go back to how that way of being was. And there's something in nurturing yourself in that moment that can happen. Just taking a walk with someone and making sure we have lunch. Make sure you have those breaks. And in the model around know yourself and heal yourself, another part of what I do is I do intuitive healing and energetic healing work. And some of that is also like going inward. It's breathing. It's sensing again, like all senses, right? And so we've like tapped out of our bodies, tapped out of our intuition. We've tapped out of listening to our gut, right? Our instincts, what feels right in our bodies, what is an alarm bell saying stop. And I think if we were more in tune to that again and have that instinctual leadership, like we'll know where to go. And if you hear that top executives, and I've asked them because of the consulting work I do, sometimes I just ask out of curiosity, how do you lead a company this large? How do you lead strategy? And the answer that I've gotten have been this, that they are able to work with partial information and make the best kind of guess based on what they know, but they trust everybody who brought them that information and help them make that decision. So they trust the team, right? They're empowered by empowered people who they work with, and then they go for it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But because they're at a place where more often than not, they're right, they can absorb mistakes. And sometimes in the levels we're at, we don't actually forgive ourselves for making mistakes. There's this culture here of perfection. There's this culture here of analysis paralysis. There's this culture of not being able to fail fast and learn from it, right? We beat ourselves up for things that go wrong and take, it's so personally and it's debilitating, right? And that's the cause of anxiety, that's the cause of depression, that's the cause of a lot of mental churn. That's negative self-talk that people have. We all have. I have it. And so the way around that, right, is to trust yourself. So you have to trust that decision is the best that you could do in that moment and not look back. And by and large, the leaders, executives that have, star-studded careers, meaning success and in that they've carried on, they have not regretted decisions they've made. So we have to look forward, but in order to do that, you have to trust yourself.
Yeah. And that trust yourself, I think, comes like it's a muscle, right? You have to keep doing it. And as you keep doing it, it gets stronger. And so then you are even better at knowing when to pause, when to ask more questions, when to listen, when to ask other people for help. That comes from just using that gut instinct, that intuition. And it isn't, I think you have to do it for yourself first. You need to, like you were saying, you need to trust yourself through various things that are happening to you every day and get very comfortable with that. Heal the parts of yourself that are the inner critic and the imposter syndrome, right? So that you're not letting that tape run rampant.
Exactly.
Or knowing that tape is there and being able to identify that's my inner critic. That's not
Mhm.
right. And then as a result, helping others listen to their voice and give empowered opportunities and giving them an opportunity to also be okay having all the feelings and being able to have a conversation about all of that because you too have experienced it. So there's a point of relationship. There's a point of vulnerability. We are now not transacting. We are transforming all of this.
All of it. Right. And to come back to this beautiful theme of your podcast about reimagining community, that's how you build community. That's how you grow and thrive. And that's how you do it together. And you can rely on each other shoulder to shoulder, knowing that, yeah, we're in this together. We make mistakes, we grow, we forgive, develop, we're committed, we're here together, we're hand in hand, despite differences, in light of any interactions we have that we may not agree on. And here's the thing about that. When you have that sense of foundational trust, it's like unconditional love, right? When you have unconditional love, I'm a parent, you're a parent, you know how that is. You just have unconditional love for your child. They can, no matter what, they can walk through the door and you will still love them. And we need that sort of foundational relationship with those around us, right? That we will have that collective, we will have that cohesiveness, we'll have that togetherness. And what that needs is trust. And when we have that, then we can fly, right? Then we feel like we can take risks. There's no bounds. We can reach the potential of the group, of ourselves, of each other. It's just where I'd like to see us go. That's the North Star. And especially during times that are uncertain or turbulent or polarizing, that's what I see as the vision to get through it all, is to have leaders that can guide through that and navigate us through, but also in yourself to be able to trust yourself through that too.
Yeah. It's, I think, a popular term that has been out is psychological safety, right? Have you heard this?
Yes.
And it's this sense of you feel safe that whatever is happening in terms of how you're interpreting things, that you can vocalize it or that you can share it with a manager, with a colleague, and you won't feel like someone's going to use it against you or anything like that. And I think when I think they talk about what teams need in order to be successful, trust and safety are like at the top of the list. And so we do need to, I think, work on that. So let's talk about all the things that you've got going on, because I know that keynotes are her jam, y'all. She's great at a keynote. She's also great at facilitation. And if your organization needs a whole lot more work, she's also really awesome at digging in with your team and helping them figure out how they need to show up, what things they need to be doing in order to be successful. I myself have been a part of this team, so I can tell you it's the real deal.
Thank you, Garland. Yes, I do keynotes, and the facilitation, I would say my sweet spot around that is the difficult conversations, the difficult and timely conversations. I tend to lead those. So if there's something your group or organization needs support with, that you need to get through the hump, I do that. Our team does training. So we have just a wide array of different topics. We also do coaching and advising. So anything to do with strategy or implementation of any type of process or connecting with others, how to lead effectively, how to communicate in an optimal way. Those are all topics that we talk about. Definitely understanding differences. That's my jam. And thinking about how we can reduce bias in systems. That's still such a really hot topic. So any of that is really how I like to engage. And as I mentioned earlier, I've written a couple of books. So one's called The Power of Employee Resource Group. It came out in 2022, and that's about affinity groups and employee network. And it's a really accessible read. I wrote that to help leaders understand how to have those networks set up. And then my other one is called Raising Multiracial Children. And people are finding that they can bring that to their organizations just to talk about multicultural households and how we have a global mindset. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. There's a lot of corporate spaces that are having me on panels and doing author book talks on that too. So I really appreciate everyone engaging with the content that I put out, and I can't wait to share more and the new ideas I have.
Wonderful. So we're going to wrap up. I ask 2 questions of every guest. One is, how are you reimagining your place in the community today?
How I'm reimagining my place in the community today is really centering on people, personal development and healing, and supporting groups and organizations through that as well. And I love the idea of community being a part of that. I think we build community wherever we go.
Wonderful. What's a song that instantly brings you back to feeling connected and energized and in community with, whether it's your family, your friends?
Go-to karaoke song actually is by George Michael. And it's Faith. And I know it's like a romantic one and it's about relationships, but I feel like we just really have to have faith. And I used to play, like, I'm not the best singer, but I'm also really good at the percussion. So I'll do the tambourine and I'll clap. And it's like such a feel-good song for me.
It is. George Michael. I love George Michael. So yes, I'm here for that. Thank you so much, Farzana. I appreciate you for being on. I appreciate you for the work that you do. I'm just so happy that we have had this time today.
Thank you so much, Garland, for having me, and for everyone listening. It's been my pleasure.
If this conversation moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every week we're bringing you more stories of real transformation. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and tag the folks in your circle who need to hear this. Want to go deeper? Check out the Community Impact Collective. Sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description. Now is the time. Are you in?